Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys, wanting to talk about the upcoming partial lunar eclipse, which will be on the 17th of July. I have to double check that. I've just had a mental blank, but I'm pretty sure it's 17th of July. That lunar eclipse, which is a partial lunar eclipse, is at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And I'm going to bring up the chart in a moment anyway, so that we can just have a look at that, have a look at the aspects to that lunar eclipse. But before I do that, before I unpack some of the things to expect, let's just recap and also familiarize ourselves with the meaning of a lunar eclipse. So first of all, there's 4 eclipses for 2019. The first one was on the 6th of January, which was a solar partial eclipse at 15 degrees of Capricorn. And then 2 weeks later, naturally, we have a full moon, and it happened to be a total lunar eclipse, which was on the 21st of January 2019 at 0 Aquarius and Leo. The next eclipse, which I've already done a video for, I'll pop a link below just in case you haven't seen it. It is worth watching because these eclipses are all linked. They're all drawing out and reflecting various themes and stories to our lives. So an eclipse year, when you have a series of eclipses take place, there's, whilst they happen, 6 months apart, as in one solar to another solar, or lunar to lunar, that duration, that period is connected to the actual eclipse that first started at the beginning of the year and then meets up again at the middle of the year and then meets up again at the end of the year. So we can't really separate them, but they are very important junctures and timing of when things will actually perhaps be in the spotlight, more crucial, more highlighted, and a lot more potent. But the fact is that whatever is going on with these eclipses in terms of what they are presenting for you in your life, and that obviously is determined through the houses in your birth chart. Where do these eclipses actually land in your birth chart? This is how you're going to personalize and understand and derive to some kind of meaning and purpose of what these eclipses are showing up for you. So the 4 eclipses for this year, that they are all connected. Now, the first one was at 15 Capricorn. The second one, 0 and 0 degrees of Leo Aquarius. And that's the only eclipse that was actually not in the same signs of Capricorn and Cancer. The 3 remainder eclipses are all in the polarity zodiac signs of Capricorn and Cancer. But that 0 degrees Leo Aquarius, that polarity, that axis is right next to the Cancer Capricorn axis anyway. So what you're going to have happen then is throughout this year, for most of you, what will happen is wherever you have Capricorn and Cancer located in your birth chart and Leo and Aquarius, you'll have 4 houses that'll be hit off basically from these eclipses. So 2nd, 3rd of July is the total solar eclipse, which is at 10 degrees of Cancer. That's the one I've already done a video for. I'll pop a link below. It is worth listening to, as I said before. And the one that we are about to step into after that will be a partial lunar eclipse on the 16th of July 2019. And that's the one I'm discussing today, which is at 24 degrees of Cancer. Capricorn. Cancer Capricorn. And the final eclipse for the year, which will be at the end of the year, is a solar annular eclipse, and that's on the 26th of December 2019. And I will do a subsequent video for that particular eclipse down the track. But just, it's important, I'm mentioning these dates because, as I said, these eclipses, they're all working together in terms of what is showing up for us. So it's just important to have these dates and to be able to track and find, I suppose, well, first of all, find where these polarities are, where these zodiac signs are in your chart. And even though there's, as I said, 6-month gaps, in that 6-month gap period, there are things brewing. There are things going on. There are things building, and it's the in-between time where there's a lot of activity or adjustments or movement or reflection, for that matter. And those same words could be said to reflect a solar and lunar eclipse as well. But when we are looking at the exact sort of timing of the eclipse, particularly the lunar eclipse, because the moon fundamentally acts as a timer in the birth chart or via transit. The moon is a timing device, almost, you could say. It basically, it's like a clock in the chart, and it just triggers things in pretty significant ways. It's really the timer of how things unfold. So with the solar eclipses, they seem to be more impactful on an external level, in that they really bring to the foreground, to the forefront, external events that will reflect the energy of that eclipse, depending on where it is in your birth chart. And as I've mentioned previously, a solar eclipse is, in ancient times, it was viewed as something to be really scared of. It's very intense, potent energy that can really bring people down, as it were. It can make you come undone, as it were. And a lot of the reason, that the perception of eclipses was such back in those days is because, as I've mentioned before, the consciousness of humanity in that time did view things in very black and white ways. And the world of psychology, for example, didn't even exist in those days. Okay, so they didn't have that consciousness and that mindset to be able to reflect internally. Instead, what was done, things were projected externally, right? So it was a very fated, black and white view upon how things would manifest in a person's life. You were either lucky or you weren't. It was either going to be, the end for you, or it wasn't. Very black and white thinking. But as we have evolved and progressed through our lives and through time, we have become more conscious on so many different levels. And this consciousness, which brings so much awareness to our existence, to our evolution, to our path, to our journey, to the meaning of our life, we are able to understand things. Just one moment. We are able to understand things, understand things from much broader perspectives, bigger picture stuff. Yes, we have events and circumstances and things that trigger and take place, but we have that capacity now, internally, psychologically and spiritually, to really grasp what's going on from those levels, to understand the importance of that, in fact, because if we don't have that, then we are just simply always projecting out there. And the projection component of life, unfortunately, the downside to that is that it's a stance of blame, and this is not my fault, this is their fault, or this is his fault, or this is her fault, or this is the organization's fault, and so on and so forth. So it takes us, it might make people feel justified, in how they're feeling, but does it empower a person? No, it doesn't, because the minute you blame somebody else, you've instantly given your power away over to the other in some kind of way, and a pretty significant way too. But when you are able to reflect and have this inner understanding, deeper understanding of your own psychology, your own behaviors, what motivates you, what are you really true and honest about within your own self, all these sorts of things really help you monitor and assess what's going on in your life in much more profound ways, where you empower yourself because you take responsibility for what's going on in your life. And once you take responsibility, that's when liberation actually comes in. Liberation doesn't come as a result of pretty much just saying that you don't have to be responsible for anything. That's not liberation or freedom. It's probably the opposite, actually, because then all you're doing is projecting all your power out there. Anyway, getting a little bit off track there. Let's get back onto this lunar eclipse. So think of the lunar eclipse as massive spotlight highlighting that area of your life, right? Whichever houses it's affecting. And shortly I'm going to actually go through the 12 houses in pairs and just give you a couple of ideas of what to think about with regards to this lunar eclipse. Not only this lunar eclipse, but the eclipses for the entire year. And what are the areas of life that are being spotlighted, highlighted, triggered, intensified, and obviously what requires your attention and what needs change as well. The eclipses don't randomly just come along and randomly go away. They really draw our attention to something very important now in our lives. In addition to that, because eclipses are connected to the nodes, the moon's nodes, that's how an eclipse takes place, because of the moon's nodes. Solar eclipse is a new moon, right? And obviously a lunar eclipse is a full moon, and the nodes are located in both those eclipses. Now, the nodes, quite apart from your evolutionary journey and what you've brought in from the past and what you are here to integrate in your evolutionary path, also point to connections, associations from the past, or new connections we make in our current journey that lead us towards our North Node, right? So North Node connections are always people that come into our life that it's usually a positive experience, because they somehow, it's a universal arrangement. Somehow these people come into our lives. They have one of their personal planets conjunct our North Node, for example, right? And that's an indication that that particular soul, that person, has come to you as part of your journey in evolution in order to assist you towards the integration of your North Node, right? So in other words, South Node, North Node very much connects to past life connections, South Node, and North Node present and future connections we make with people. So even during the eclipses, this can also be the case, where things come up from the past, people come up from the past, South Node and North Node, people come into our life at a very specific time as well, in order to help us integrate this North Node journey, whatever that may be for you. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, the solar eclipses, as I was saying before, tend to be crisis. And they tend to be crisis when a person is really out of touch with their own inner psychology, their own inner dynamics from unconscious and subconscious levels. Most of us are out of touch with that anyway. It's just how it is. But I think when you have been doing conscious work on your path, on yourself, and you have a greater sense of your own inner dynamics and psychology, motivations and behaviors, and are able to see things from deeper perspectives, you have more awareness, more consciousness, you are more in touch generally with what you need to be doing with your life, with your path, with your journey. You have more insight into things that show up. You're able to see things from a broader perspective. You're able to associate meaning to what's happening, as opposed to just being angry or being a victim or blaming, etc., etc. So a solar eclipse will really throw someone for a six when they are really out of touch with their own inner content. Because what happens is it just gets totally projected out there, and naturally it will be reflected through circumstances in the person's life. And it's only crisis because the person is so out of touch with certain content and aspects of their own inner self, inner life, inner dynamics, that the eclipse, because it's a spotlight sort of energy, it's a scorpionic sort of energy as well, because it asks us to really assess what is truly valuable in our life at this point, and what really needs to be cleaned out. It's like cleaning out your house, basically. So the solar eclipse will be problematic when you are not authentic with your own path, and just completely out of touch with your own inner stuff and inner dynamics. So presenting difficult circumstances externally. The lunar eclipse doesn't necessarily operate in the same fashion, but it does highlight things very strongly. It's a massive spotlight because the full moon, as we know, is an illumination. It's saying the full moon is this bright, bright full moon in the sky that we see that illuminates everything, right? So it will illuminate whatever it is that's going on in your life regarding where that full moon lands. And it's not just about the house that it lands in, it's about taking into account the opposite house as well. It's always very important. Polarities are very, very important. Nothing works in isolation. Now, the lunar eclipse has a different sort of edge to it. It doesn't necessarily, this isn't a black and white rule, but generally speaking, the lunar eclipse doesn't really evolve so much with external crisis. That's more the solar eclipse. The lunar eclipse I think it will evolve more in some kind of emotional crisis. A recognition and awareness about what's really screwed up in a person's life, what's really messed up, what's really out of sync, what's really not working. So it'll bring the awareness, the consciousness, the ability to see things from an illuminated level, crystallized level. Whether a person pays attention to that or not is entirely up to them, but it'll be there in your face. And it'll be polarized because the full moon is the sun and the moon opposite each other. So it might just be reflected back to you through relationships, through another individual. The two lights of the sky, the sun and the moon, are the two primary masculine and feminine principles that are a reflection of our own inner feminine and masculine, which clearly relate to the world of relationships and how we relate to people, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual preference. We all relate to the feminine and the masculine in different ways. So the lunar energy is very, very stimulating from that emotional level, the emotional body, just your emotional nature in general. And this lunar eclipse has some really heavy aspects to it. And it's not going to be easy. So let's start to unpack a bit of that. Okay. So just a couple more points. A lunar eclipse somehow gives you the ability to manifest new ways to move into your future, all right? Because the full moon, as I said before, it's going to illuminate that area of your life that needs addressing, correction, adjustment, change, release, purging, whatever it may be, attention. And you won't do it during the full moon, but the full moon will give you that insight, that clarity of what it is you're actually dealing with, what it is you really need to start working on, what it is you really need to release. And the full moon, because it's shining the spotlight, shining the light, it's giving you an opportunity through way of awareness, because that's what a full moon does. It creates awareness. It's an oppositional aspect. Ultimately, at its highest level, is pure crystal awareness. So that, oppositions are very powerful for that reason. They initially can be experienced as a polarized energy where, I'm the moon and you're the sun, for example, and there's this polarization going on. But ultimately, the awareness that comes through an opposition is one of the most powerful ways to actually gain awareness. So the full moon will bring to your awareness, in other words, what it is you really need to get on track with. And then you've got pretty much 6 months to kind of work on that, you could say, because when the solar eclipse comes around, which will be on the 26th of December 2019, so essentially 6 months later, if you can recognize what shows up really strongly with this full moon, partial lunar eclipse, then you are in a position with your awareness to actually work towards that very consciously by the time the next solar eclipse comes around. Because when that next solar eclipse comes around, that can be more of an empowering experience, because you've already done the work of what the full moon lunar eclipse showed you needed to pay attention to. So you can see that there's a link with all of them. And with the lunar eclipse, things are coming to your awareness. Whereas with the solar eclipse, things are very unconscious, and it's very difficult to be objective and to really see what's going on. But it is the lunar eclipses that help us in this process to become illuminated, to become aware. So that's how I would encourage you to think about the solar and lunar eclipses, the differences between them and how they are actually working together. The Tibetan Buddhists actually say that any activity is seriously amplified during eclipses, solar or lunar. And whether that's a positive action that one takes or whether that's a negative action, the amplification will be there. And they also go further and say that the activity that takes place during a solar or lunar eclipse, because of the energy of an eclipse, the activity being amplified has so much force and power behind it that the result and the consequences of that action, positive or negative, that has been implemented, its ramifications can be felt in the future. And when I say the future, I don't mean tomorrow or next month or next year. It can be projected a fair way ahead. That's what the Tibetan Buddhist monks say anyway, which, is very interesting. So, for example, if people were to communities, and there's a lot of communities universally worldwide that do this because they understand in some kind of fashion anyway the absolute power of the energy of a lunar eclipse, solar eclipse. So communities come together and they sit in meditation. Now, you don't have to do this with a community. You can do it just on your own. I do. I meditate every single night without fail. Sometimes I do it for 2 hours every night. Which is another reason why time escapes me and I seem to fall behind on my schedule on things. Anyway, so the power of meditation during full moons and particularly eclipses, okay, so solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, the energy is so extremely powerful and amplified that what you're actually doing in that moment during that eclipse, the power of that it's like a domino effect, right? And it's whilst you're going to have an experience during that meditation, whether you're doing it alone or in a community, the intention behind that meditation is so extremely powerful that it can have incredible effects on your life for years to come. It's very, very powerful stuff. So just something else to perhaps consider. Naturally, as I said, you need to look at the houses that these eclipses land in. It'll be 4 houses essentially for most of you, okay, in your birth chart. Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, Aquarius in terms of 2019. Eclipses seem to be extremely potent, extremely powerful when they hit off an angle in your chart. So the ascendant, descendant, IC, and MC. They are also especially potent and powerful if they form a conjunction or opposition to one of your natal planets in the chart. the planet that gets hit off by an eclipse shows you which aspects of your personality can actually gain greater insight and awareness about the issues described by where the eclipse is located and the archetype of the planet that is being eclipsed. The house shows, or the houses show, the challenges and difficulties that will be presented if one is not in tune, one is not on track. But in addition to that, the revelations that can result. So it's about looking at the actual eclipse, the signs, the houses, and any planets or any angles that these eclipses may be triggering in your own natal chart. Okay. Now, there's a few things going on with this particular eclipse chart. Mercury will be retrograde. Neptune just went retrograde a couple of days ago. Pluto's retrograde. So there's a lot of energy. Saturn is retrograde in this chart as well. We'll go to that in a moment. Just checking that I haven't missed any critical points that I wanted to share with you guys. Okay. I'm missing a sheet. Never mind, it'll come to me. All right, so what I'll do, guys, I'll just share my screen. And let's have a look at this chart. Where are we? Okay, here it is. So this is the, I was correct, 17th of July, 2019. And this is a partial lunar eclipse. You can see the details up on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, again, do not worry about the location of the planets in this chart. We're not going to assess that because this is for Melbourne, Australia, okay? The chart is obviously going to look different in every single different location. But what we are going to have a look at and discuss are the aspects, first of all. And perhaps before I even do that, or maybe I think I'll discuss the aspects first, and then I'll finish up with running through the houses and some key themes, concepts to for you guys to consider in relation to where this eclipse lands in your own birth chart, and not only this one, but the other previous eclipses that we've had this year, because there's going to be a theme there. And they are at different degrees, so you do need to look at whether each eclipse was aspecting an angle or a planet in your chart, because you're going to feel it a lot more. Cancer Capricorn people are going to feel these eclipses quite a lot, quite intensely, because these eclipses will be either, conjuncting your moon or opposing your moon, or conjuncting your sun or opposing your sun, and so forth. In addition to that, though, if you have Venus or Mars in Capricorn, I have Mars in Capricorn, so these eclipses have been very important for me because they've been triggering my Mars, which is in the 12th house. And that's not an easy placement for Mars, by the way. Even though it's in an exalted position and it has amazing aspects to it, it's still a Mars that I've had to work through very, very consciously throughout my whole life. Planets in the 12th house can be forces working against you, people working against you, until you really find ways to become conscious of that energy and integrate it in a very authentic and conscious way. All right, so it's very, very tricky with planets in the 12th house. I'm still working on that, Mars, but I've come a very, very long way. Okay, so here's the chart for the partial lunar eclipse. We can see that the moon is at 24 degrees of Capricorn. The sun's obviously as well at 24 degrees of Cancer, directly opposite. Now, clearly the most obvious thing that we really, really need to pay attention to is the Pluto conjunct the moon. But actually, before I go there, what the other thing that is important to always look at on any level of astrology anyway, but particularly when you're looking at eclipses, it's important to look at the sign, what element is the sign, what quality is the sign. And what I mean by that is, here we have an earth sign, moon in Capricorn, earth, right? It's a cardinal sign. Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So we're talking about action, okay? So even though I said a moment ago that lunar eclipses, for the most part, tend to trigger our emotional body, our intrinsic emotional stuff, our psychic body, if you like, deep inner unconscious components that connects to the past. The moon is the body in the chart that is always connected to the past. And when I say past, I mean in the current life and in previous incarnations as well. The moon is a container that holds all this material that lies subconscious and unconscious in our beingness. So material that's stored in the moon, in the moon's container, has lifetimes of memories, which reflects behaviors, habits, patterns, instinctual behaviors, motivations, desires. Some of that can be wonderful. Some of it can be really murky, right? There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. Point, though, is that with the full moon, the lunar eclipse, because it's the moon which represents the past, something about the past is blocked out during the lunar eclipse, which enables you to, it's like being able to step aside for a moment from all the conditioned past experiences. And because you're able to step away and see things in a brighter light, full moon, it is that moment that enables you to consciously take an action, make a decision with totally new awareness, because the conditioning of the past doesn't have such a big pull on you, right? That's another thing that the full moon total lunar eclipse presents or can offer you. Now, this Pluto being conjunct the moon is extremely important for a number of different reasons, but we've had this Pluto-Saturn conjunction for quite some time now, and it's going to be there for some time. I've done a video on that. You can also watch that video if you want to know more about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, just that conjunction alone. But that conjunction is very, very important with this particular lunar eclipse because it's right there with the moon. So we can actually expand our scope here and say, okay, what has Pluto and Saturn been bringing up for me in my life? What are the challenges that I've had to really work through? Now, I really want you to understand that when it comes to Pluto and Saturn conjunction, which only happens every 33 years or so it's a big deal, it's a big aspect. The work that is done with this particular configuration is really probably the hardest work you will ever have to do in your life. It's the hardest work. It's hard labor. It's by no means is it easy. It's really going through the trenches. It's really asking and calling for so much discipline and hard work on your part to smash through certain things. It's painful. It's excruciating in some cases. It's terrifying. It's just really, really difficult. But the wonderful, amazing thing that can come out of the work that you do with this Pluto Saturn South Node in Capricorn conjunction is your sense of renewal and transformation that will eventually be seen is one of the most powerful transformative experiences you can have, because this stuff here, this Pluto in Capricorn, South Node in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, is holding in a space, is holding the vibration of your deepest, deepest, deepest resistances and fears to what you need to remove, let go of, decondition, break down. It's the biggest breakdown of the deepest psychological, emotional, spiritual, psychological, did I say that? I think I did, patterns that we ourselves are not consciously aware of. We're very, very complex beings. You know, we're just so complex. But anyway, this conjunction will highlight and will bring up your deepest fears and resistances, all and matters around control, power struggles, self-empowerment, separation, abandonment. You know, these very, very deep issues come rising in very, very strongly. And naturally, that's going to be playing out wherever it is transiting your birth chart. So if you take all that into consideration and combine it with this lunar eclipse, this lunar eclipse is extremely powerful, isn't it, when you think about that? Look at what it's carrying with it. It's carrying Pluto, South Node, Saturn. So the way I see this lunar eclipse is that whatever this Saturn-Pluto energy has been digging up for you, which, as I said, it's connected to your deepest fears and resistances. Now, who wants to face their deepest fears and resistances? Most people do not, and I can understand that. But when a lunar eclipse comes along and it has that combination there with it, you can't deny it. You can't ignore it. You can't resist it. You will actually see a lot more clearly, with a lot more awareness, what it is that you fear the most. What are your deepest fears and resistances? What are the deepest psychological stuck patterns and structures and programs that are lying dormant within you, but that dominate your life? So, see, this lunar eclipse is so freaking powerful because of that reason. It's going to give so much light and emphasis to these core issues pertaining to you on these very, very deep fundamental levels that can really change your life if you are prepared to really look at what's being shown to you. Full moon is a spotlight. You're going to see it. Whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, you are going to see it. How you act on that, how much you are prepared to be honest about that, how much courage you can bring to that is going to differ for every single individual. But the fact of the matter is, this lunar eclipse will bring it all up and will just blow it out there in total illumination so you can actually see it. So I see this lunar eclipse as a very, very powerful opportunity to gain incredible insight, incredible understanding about how you can deal with this Saturn-Pluto that's probably been excruciating. I know for a lot of people it has. It's one of the most difficult aspects, in my opinion. But it's also one of the most powerful aspects in terms of the incredible, insurmountable, revelational or revolutionary work that can come through. But you have to do the work. it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's really hard work. Point being, though, that the rewards are out of what your mind can actually perceive. That's what you need to understand and have faith in and believe in, because when you can step into that belief and that faith and that confidence and that courage, you will be able to work with this energy. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. We've just got to chip away at it, you know, day by day by day by day. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Nothing gets built in a day. So it's really, really important that we actively and consciously address and work with this vibration in our own personal life as it is calling us, because it is calling us individually in very unique ways. Yes, it's the same planetary energies. Yes, it's the same archetypes. But the way it relates to you and the way it relates to me is going to be completely different. We are all incredibly unique souls and infinite, right? So this lunar eclipse, consider it an incredible opportunity to really become so much more insightful, have so much more understanding about things that you haven't been able to previously see clearly. That's one thing. Which is probably the most important in my opinion. Now, the sun is obviously opposite Pluto as well. The moon's conjunct Pluto. So even if you are just to address that aspect alone, it's clear that the process of death and rebirth, renewal, purging, transforming, releasing, letting go is central, a central theme to this particular lunar eclipse. I mean, the thing is, in my experience and my understanding, the more we resist something, the harder it becomes, right? So we have to find a way to allow this energy to bring through what it needs to bring through for each of us individually and collectively, because clearly it's having a collective impact and experience as well. So the Pluto is going to be, the Pluto is the closest aspect to the sun and the moon. So the Pluto is dominating this energy, this vibration, this lunar eclipse. So the energy of what Pluto brings into this is going to be felt for weeks and weeks and weeks post this eclipse. And it's already been felt pre this eclipse, which is another reason why I'm doing this early, so that people can start to consider and think about this upcoming lunar and solar eclipse in the month of July. So Pluto is the dominating force because it is the closest planet to the sun and the moon. So Pluto is dictating to everybody else in this chart, to all the other players. Pluto is dictating what's going to go down, what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Things are going to basically be removed. Things are going to die, leave your life. They have to. It's you know, one of the most painful things in life for a lot of people is the letting go of attachments. That's why the Buddhists say suffering in life comes from how attached we are to things on this material plane. And when it comes to people, loved ones, you know, I think that is the hardest experience of releasing and letting go, including pets, by the way. I consider pets to be just as important as humans, if not more sometimes. So the losing of someone is always one of the deepest, most painful soul experiences anyone can have. There are some signs that are not signs that care so much about people. I have to be honest about that. Taurus and Capricorn come to mind immediately. Two very strong earth signs. They're not about people. Those signs are about what they want themselves. And I don't mean to offend any Taurians or Capricorns, because naturally there is so much more to those two archetypes. But I'm just pointing out one distinctive characteristic of these two earth signs. Taurus is about my stuff, my food, my comfort, my money in the bank, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Capricorn is, how successful am I? How recognized am I? How much respect do I have from everybody around me? Is how up there is my status? It's just a fact that that's the nature of these archetypes, operating at the personality level. Now, not everyone is operating on that stream. I'm very aware of that. But there are a lot of people who are. And it's not a right or a wrong. It's just how it is. So the reason I mention that is because some people, especially the water signs, they, I think, experience suffering and pain around loss in such deep ways. Now, you don't have to be a water sign as in your sun being in a water sign. You can have Venus in Pisces, which I do, for instance. You can have the moon in a water sign. And, you know, the water quality, the water element takes us into the ocean, right? Into the ocean of oneness, but into the ocean, the collective of pain as well. It's that extreme empathy to feel everyone's pain. That's what water does. It just connects. Water connects, so it connects people. Earth is about structure and stability and security, right? So anyway, that's going a bit off track, but it is important because the sun is in Cancer here, okay? So the Cancer archetype is really speaking very strongly to our soul, I believe. The fourth house, which is where Cancer resides naturally in the natural order of the zodiac, is one of the deepest points of your own subjective nature, right? It's your own self-image, but it takes you deeper into your soul life, your soul life. Cancer is very deep on that level. And, you know, on that sort of external level, it shows up as the need to feel safe, secure, to nurture, to love, to be cared for, to care for others, etc. So we have these two polarities, Cancer, Capricorn, strongly emphasized through this lunar eclipse. And the moon is in Capricorn, though. So because Pluto is right next to it, we have to deconstruct some of these harsher structures that we have embodied in our life that make us perhaps feel more secure. We have certain defenses and protective mechanisms around us, but we have to soften those very hard barriers that we've built. It is important to have clear boundaries in life. There's no question about that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if we have become so hard that we don't let anybody in, there's just more division, more separation. And the more the world is divided and not united, the more we see these dark, lower astral behaviors that result in the death of animals, people, and so forth. And this message is so important because it always comes back to this. I don't care if I do another reading in 20 years' time, I will still say this, or in 1,000 years' time, because it does come back to this. If we can't soften our own heart, if we can't allow that tenderness and that vulnerability and that sensitivity to shine through, we can't give that out there. You know, we can't give that to anybody else. And the way to unite and connect is through those sorts of qualities. It's not through being hard and strict and, you know, just not letting people in, because that's what Capricorn would do. But because that's the nature of Capricorn, that's just how it functions. It's not about emotions, right? Cancer is though. Cancer's all about the emotions. They get so lost in their emotions, you know. It's such a sensitive sign. So we have this axis of Capricorn Cancer very strongly highlighted clearly during this lunar eclipse. And these two archetypes, they're both cardinal signs, Cancer and Capricorn. And cardinal energy is about initiation, action. So even though, and I started to say this earlier, but I got sidetracked, as I do sometimes, the cardinal quality asks us to take action, okay? It's not about sort of sitting around. And the earth sign, Capricorn, is also just the nature of earth as well. Well, especially so because it's Capricorn and it's a cardinal sign, and Cancer's a cardinal sign. Some action needs to be taken, really. Some steps really need to be taken with regards to what this lunar eclipse brings up. There would be other signs that would represent taking more of a step back and allowing things to show up and sort of take that, allowing things to process and unfold through their own doing, as it were, to an extent. But when you're talking about Cancer Capricorn, they are cardinal energies. They are about taking action. And look, honestly, I mean, Capricorn in esoteric astrology is, when it's evolved and it's operating from that soul level, Capricorn is extraordinary in terms of its wisdom, you know, and its spiritual insight. It's that mountain on the mountain, on the, pardon me, it's the goat on the mountain, symbolized by reaching the top of the mountain and looking back, and there's humanity, as it were, could be goats in this case, following, right, trying to catch up to where this goat is going. This is the Capricorn archetype. And the esoteric Capricorn person is not going to run up to that mountain in order to get there first and be the successful one. The esoteric one is going to find a way to bring the rest of the herd, animals or humanity, with him, right? So that there's this equal connection, sharing, and level and distribution of wisdom and success, right? So the esoteric component of Capricorn operates at a very different level. It's truly you see there's a symbol of the Capricorn, which is the Capricorn that has the fish's tail. That's a very mystical symbol that pretty much reflects the deep esoteric wisdom from a soul level that a evolved Capricorn soul has. That capacity is there. So it's important to bring that in as well, because this Capricorn energy, on an esoteric level and on a level where people are vibrating on higher frequencies, this is about incredible insight and wisdom and understanding and helping so many other people with it as well, not just yourself, because Capricorn is an archetype that connects to society, right? So it's what we contribute to society, not just for ourselves, but how we can actually contribute and help, right? Society and humanity in some kind of way. So there's so many different ways to look at this, but needless to say, Pluto is there, and there is an ask, there is a call for really transcending something here. And the something belongs to patriarchal old structures that exist inherently within all of us from previous incarnations. And it's the call to move forward and basically honor the feminine, right? And get more of that balance taking place in our own life as well, and within our own self. We need to have that balance of the feminine and the masculine. And this is, I think this speaks to this very, very strongly as well, because Pluto is there, and Pluto is about death, endings. By the way, Pluto is also the planet that can reflect things reappearing. So don't be surprised if someone reappears into your life during this, could be now, could have already happened, which would be part of this eclipse, or it could be in weeks to come, or even months to come, because Pluto, and it is conjunct the South Node, and the South Node is the past, the Moon is the past, and Pluto is things that reappear. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit if any of you, somebody came back into your life from the past. And when I say past, it can be this life or previous lives, but it will be a very important connection, because it's going to have the quality of transforming you. Somehow the connection, the relationship holds that vibration and that quality. So I guess be open and receptive to that as well. Okay, now I'm going to do a separate video on Neptune sextiling Saturn, because otherwise this video will be 2 hours long, and I know there's a lot of you that don't like to listen too long. There's some of you that are, and that's fine, I get that. So look, that's basically my message with this lunar eclipse. It's very, very important, very, very powerful, and predominantly linked to the Saturn, Pluto, Capricorn stuff that you are working through. That's over a 2-3 year period. And this lunar eclipse is just going to be an extremely powerful force to bringing something to consciousness for you, which is powerful, to say the least. If you are conscious, there's liberation, there's freedom, there's meaning, there's understanding, there's self-empowerment. It's walking through light. When you're walking through the dark, that's when you feel helpless or disempowered, although that is a necessary process to life as well. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. So I'll do a separate video on Neptune sextiling Saturn. Just one other thing here, Venus is opposite Saturn in this lunar eclipse chart. And I think that's very important, because Saturn is retrograde and the opposition is exact. So it's a very, very important aspect feeding into this lunar eclipse chart as well. Clearly that's going to highlight a lot more matters around relationships. There's likely to be separations for people. And it's going to be pretty painful. Separations usually are anyway. And there's certainly, if there's no separation for you, and I know that sounds negative, but a separation is not always a negative thing. It's usually a necessary process, because we need to move on in our journey. And we can't move on when we hang on and hold on to stuff, whether that's people or, you know, material things and so forth. We need to make space, otherwise things can't come in. And so it's sorry, I've just had this thing pop up, don't need that. We simply need to release in order for new things to come forth, right? To come into our space, into our field. So this Saturn opposite Venus will either create some separations for people, or it would just change the complete structures of where the relationships are at. Because what's going to be highlighted through this lunar eclipse is going to be so powerful in terms of how you see it, how clearly you can see something. And this Saturn Venus will be speaking to this as well, because Saturn's in Capricorn, same sign as the moon, and it's all there conjunct the South Node and Pluto. So there will be matters on relationship stuff that will strike very, very strongly for people. And as I said, it will be matters of separation or a total restructure of how you actually are dealing with a relationship, and moving forward, what that's going to look like. But a real serious kind of energy to it. It's not lighthearted, it's not lightweight, it's not like let's go to the pub and have a beer. It's like, let's get serious. Let's sit down and talk about what's going on with us. What's the nature of our relationship? I need to understand where you are, that sort of stuff. It brings in that serious tone, which is necessary and important at certain points of any relationship. So this will come up very strongly as well. I don't even know how long I've been going for, but what I'd like to do, just very quickly, if I may, I'll try and go through this as quickly as I can. Think about everything that I just said in the context of which houses these eclipses are in your own natal birth chart, right? So I'm just going to run through some comments, which what I'll do is I'll be pairing up the houses, right? So 1, 7, 2, 8, etc. So if these eclipses fall in 1, 7, this axis basically brings around the issues of self and other, so it's relationships clearly. And the question becomes, am I immersed in myself and not relating to others? Or am I so caught up in a relationship that I've forgotten who I am? So this is the point that you need to really consider when you are thinking about this eclipse. These are the core issues if the eclipse falls in 1 and 7, okay? 2 and 8 would be the issues of grounding and emptying. Grounding, Taurus, emptying, Scorpio. Am I stuck in a house in the midst of 15-year accumulation of possessions and feeling like I can never leave? Or have I so let go of things I need for living that I am not grounded at all? So you can see we're talking about the archetype of Scorpio and Taurus. Taurus hanging on, Scorpio letting go. You can do either of those in extreme ways. That was just an example. So this is what you need to think about if these eclipses are triggering these houses. There's much more to these houses, but these are just a couple of tips that might be helpful for you. 3 and 9, the issue of integrating in ordinary reality and connecting with spiritual realms. Ordinary reality, Gemini, spiritual realms, Sag, 3rd, 9th house. Am I so hooked on my computer, fax machine, telephone, and plane flights that I haven't had a mystical thought or feeling in months? That would be the question. 4th and 10th, the issue of inner knowing and outer power. Inner knowing, Cancer, outer power, Capricorn. Am I so deeply involved in my home or in a subconscious exploration that I am disempowered in the world out there? Or am I so involved in power struggles that I've forgotten exploration of my inner realm, inner life, soul life? 5th and 11th houses. This polarity turns around desires and giving away. Am I so involved in my creativity that I pay no attention to giving to others? 5th house. Or am I giving everything all day to people who need me and paying no attention to the needs of my own inner child? So you can see the split there, right? 6 and 12. This is about being in the moment and letting go into divine fusion, 12th house. Am I so obsessed with my responsibilities, 6th house, that I've lost contact with spirit, 12th house? Am I so involved in mystical contemplation, 12th house, that I'm not existing in the moment, in ordinary reality, Virgo, 6th house? So they're the houses that I've just covered, with just a couple of little points that I think are very useful if you just sit down and think about those two houses, because these eclipses will be in any of these pairs of houses for any one of you. So have a think about that. Have a think about what I've said about this eclipse, and that particularly that Saturn-Pluto conjunction there with the South Node as well. This is an incredibly powerful lunar eclipse, and I think people have already started feeling it, and people will feel it for weeks and weeks and weeks to come. Okay, I will leave it there for today, and I hope what I've shared with you is useful and helpful and insightful. Again, you know, feel free to leave comments and questions below. I do my best to answer all the questions. Sometimes people ask questions that are like an essay long, and I don't mean to be rude, but it's just too much for me to respond to questions that are that long. So I would ask you please to keep your answers, your questions very succinct and short and relative to the content. And most of you are doing that, so thank you for doing that. But it does take a lot of time and effort and energy to respond to all these questions. So I just need people to keep their questions quite short. If that's possible, that would be great. Thanks to any new subscribers that have come on. There's been a few of you the last couple of weeks. And if you are interested in having a reading with me, I do many different types of readings. Just email me directly. I'll have my details below, and we can go from there. There's lots of different things that we can discuss, look at, explore, etc. I am in the process of trying to create an online course. I haven't been able to do much with that the last couple of weeks. I've been very, very busy just in my own life and trying to catch up with readings and clients, and it's takes a lot of time, and takes not only a lot of time physically in the time of my day, but energetically it takes a lot, you know, when I sit down pardon me, and prepare a chart for you. I don't do computerized readings. I do live readings with people. Sometimes it'll be a recording, but it'll be me sitting there with your chart, giving you my insight, my wisdom, my understanding through what I'm seeing. And I don't sit there, look at your chart, do the recording and send it off. I sit with your chart for several days. I take it with me to the coffee shop. To give you an example, right? So there's a lot of my time spiritually and emotionally and mentally and physically that goes into the work that I do. And it's important for you to know that, because everybody works differently, and you can't know what I do unless I actually tell you. And what I've told you is just the tip of the iceberg of what I actually do with each person, which is another reason why it takes me quite some time to get through my readings, and which is why I'm really behind at the moment, and which is why it takes me sometimes a week or so to get back on here with another video, because these two take time and energy. But anyway, I just wanted you guys to know those few little pointers about how I work personally with people as well, because it is important. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon. I do want to make the Neptune Saturn sextile video, because that's a very, very important aspect, and that's throughout all of 2019. And that can be very, very helpful for all of you on a number of different levels. So I'll be back with that soon. And yeah, see you guys soon. Much love and blessings. And watch this solar eclipse video before you watch this one if you can. Okay, thanks, and bye for now.